Hello, everybody, and I'm here to talk to you about the great video game crash of 1983 today. It was the event that almost smothered the games industry, as you can see. So here's just a brief overview. The great video game crash of 1983 was an event that saw the game industry forced to its knees after mismanagement and overproduction ruined the consumer base for video games altogether. We'll get into it more in depth a little bit later, but I just want to give you guys an overview. As you can see, there's a little broken controller. Just a little fun thing I thought I might add. Alright, so we'll talk about a little bit of backstory for it first. So we're going to start with this console here. It was the Atari 2600. There's a picture of it down at the bottom. It was the leading console at the time and was revolutionary in how it was the first cartridge-based system, so the games no longer had to be hard programmed into the console. Therefore, many games could be produced rather quickly for the system and allowed to be moved around however anyone wanted. Alright, an unintended side effect of this is that it quickly led to many people buying the console and the accompanying games. It became the most widespread console, and therefore the console represented a way to make money for many companies. I wouldn't say it was unintended. It was actually rather wanted because, it was a commercial product, but the unintended side effect was that a lot of companies decided they wanted to make games for this console. However, game development was in its infancy at the time. Alright, so that's where the problem started. Third-party developers were allowed on the console after a brief period, and many of them rushed to create anything they could so as not to miss out on what they saw as a cash cow. However, the problems came because there was no way to ensure the quality or entertainment value of the games being released at the time. I don't know if you know, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. If you've ever played a terrible game, you know that you never ever want to do that again. It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth and creates a really horrible memory overall. I know I hate it. So because all these companies were attempting to put out as many games as possible as fast as possible so as to capitalize on the money, it led to an avalanche of horrible games being released onto the market, which summarily ruined the entire consumer experience and broke their faith in the console. If you had to wade through a massive amount of horrible games just to find one good one, I'm sure you'd feel like your time was wasted. I know I would. Most people gave up before they even found a game worth playing, if that tells you anything about how bad it really was. So now we're going to talk a little bit about E.T. It's pointed to as the game which ultimately kicked off the great video game crash. E.T. was released in December of 1982, and it was developed by a man named Scott Warshaw, I believe. When it was finally, he only had a 5-week span to develop it in because that summer he had gotten the rights to create ET for the Atari under Activision. The man, don't get me wrong, he was a genius. He'd made pretty awesome games before then, but anyone with a 5-week budget to create a serviceable game that people are going to enjoy, it's not going to happen. It's really not going to happen. So the game that he put out was horrible, and consumers lost trust in the one company they thought they could trust, which was Activision. It really irreparably damaged the idea of video games in the consumer's mind and tainted it very much. Alright, so just for reference, here's a video of some gameplay so you guys can see how terrible ET really is. So now you've got the title screen, which looks actually very horrible. Alright, so I don't know about you guys, but I didn't see a single bit of redemption present in that entire clip. It was awful from start to finish. I honestly, watching it, felt as though I was cheated just by seeing it. The objective is entirely unclear. The game is unfair. It's literally just a slog to even look at. And I know I would never ever pay money to get that. And if I did, I would be horribly disappointed. So you can imagine just a little bit of how the consumers of 1982 felt when they bought this game for their children and saw what actually came out of the package. So here are the effects of the crash. The market crashed, as you know would be suggested by a crash. Sales contracted an astounding 97% in just 1 year. I don't know if you know that, but in terms of raw numbers, that meant that the games industry itself went from grossing around 3.7 to 3.2 billion. The numbers are very hazy. Dollars a year in 1982 to in 1983 only getting $100 million. 97% decrease. The games market had been destroyed. No one thought video games could come back after this. Consumers didn't buy games and didn't want anything to do with them after what they had just been through. Stores had fire sales in an attempt to mitigate whatever their losses, get whatever money they could back, and it was all just a huge mess. However, a savior came along. A relatively unknown new Japanese company came onto the North American scene with their new console, and that console was marketed as a toy and an exclusive, not some general console like the Atari 2600 had been marketed as. The company that introduced this console was Nintendo. It released the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985, and along with some classics of gaming that are revered today, such as Super Mario Bros. This rebuilt consumer faith in video games and jump-started the gaming industry in America again. It seemed as though the crash was over, and it was all thanks to Nintendo and their genius marketing. So where does that leave us now? The crash having been finally ended, gaming regained its popularity and the industry continued to grow and moved into what we know today as the games industry. However, the crash taught the industry that consumers couldn't be taken for granted and that a commitment to quality was the only thing that led to success, nothing else. All right, thank you for watching my presentation. That's the end. I hope you guys have learned a lot and had a good time. Goodbye.